everyone. This is the Naples Money Managers News You Can Use. I'm Marcus Bickle, and I am bringing you some, news you can use. As you can see, I'm by myself today, unfortunately. But Dawn should be back next week, so you'll get both of us again. So what has been going on since we last talked? One of the big market makers, NVIDIA, reported earnings yesterday. Like usual, fantastic earnings, and critically, they guided higher, which is very important to the AI trade as a whole. And let's talk about that a little bit right now, because I know a lot of people are beginning to get like .com vibes about the AI trade. And I can kind of understand that. I definitely could. And we've been talking about this for years, folks. If you go back, you can probably go back 6 or 7 years, maybe 4 years, and there are videos that we did talking about kind of the beginnings of this bubble and whether or not it is a bubble or not. So if you think about the .coms, for those of us who lived through it, many of us remember a time when these companies had nothing. They were literally just like a name on a napkin, and people would invest in them online. You know, things like Pets.com or things like that, just because of the fact that the internet was so new and it seemed like it had such potential. People were willing to throw money at the wall to see what stuck. And in many ways, that is reminiscent of where we are now, because where we are now is AI. I'm sure most of you have played with ChatGPT or any of the other large language models out there, Claude, Grok, I think Gemini is Google's. There's a few other ones out there, DeepSeek, or the image generators like Veo or Genie. So those are very new, only within the last few years. 2020 was when ChatGPT actually launched. And we've seen since then an enormous amount of capital expenditure, CapEx, by these companies. Companies like Google, Meta, Apple, all the really, really big, the Magnificent Seven, as we call them. And we've seen, because of that CapEx, they've kind of had like a straight upward growth. And obviously the biggest winner of that is NVIDIA, because NVIDIA makes what all of AI runs on, which are their graphics processors, GPUs. Those GPUs funnel all AI development, whether it's here, whether it's China, all of it basically goes through NVIDIA. And that's kind of fueled NVIDIA's meteoric growth. That's why their revenues basically double every time they report. That's why 70% of all NVIDIA employees are millionaires. It's all of the AI trade funnels through NVIDIA. Now, why are people calling that a bubble? So this is the part that it's kind of difficult to get your arms around, because you get two conflicting reports here. On one hand, you get things like Reuters or New York Times recently had a report that something like 95% of all AI agents, AI that's designed to do a job, are failing at their job. So only a 5% success rate. That's incredibly low. You wouldn't hire from a firm that 95% of their employees were terrible. You wouldn't. So that kind of raises a question as to whether or not all of this money that has been spent on developing AIs is actually going to pay off. If these AI agents never turn out to be anything more than a fun way to write an email to your coworker, that may not justify the billions that have been spent. But if they are right and that can replace a person, well, now we're off to the races. So that's one side of that. The other side is Palantir, or its sister company, Anduril. Both of those are AI companies, very similar to OpenAI, Microsoft, all of those, but they don't work in the same fields. They're producing AI for like enterprise scale or even military components. Anduril and Palantir are famously contracted by the Defense Department to put their AI inside of, autonomous weapons programs. And there were reports recently that Anduril is very, very close to producing the first fully autonomous jet fighter. So that's kind of interesting, folks. One of the big issues with conducting war in a democracy like ours is you have to send your citizens to prosecute a war. Inevitably, that involves young men and women dying in a foreign country, and that creates political pressure. People call it war fatigue, whatever you want to call it. Eventually, whether or not your country has actually been defeated per se, the citizens no longer will vote for that war. And you can kind of see that within our lifetimes, especially the millennials. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they drug on for decades, and they became very politically untenable. But what if you didn't have to send our boys and girls over there? What if you were sending robots? You start to see why prosecuting a war in a foreign nation without the human cost is something that would be very attractive to our militaries. So that's what Palantir and Anduril and our counterparts in China are really kind of racing towards. So there's a lot of components to this AI trade, and I know I've covered a lot of ground, but generally speaking, I don't think we got any more clarity from the NVIDIA earnings. We know that people are still spending an enormous amount of money buying the NVIDIA's chips in order to continue building out these large language models in the hopes that they will eventually turn a profit. But then on the other hand, we have our government more than willing to hook these up to, well, a multi-million-dollar F-35, which is a state-of-the-art fifth generation, don't quote me on that, fifth generation jet fighter. So I often have a hard time wrapping my arms around whether or not AI is just a bubble and it's a really, really expensive autocomplete engine and that's all they've managed to create, or is the next step, as we're seeing in Palantir. So for right now, folks, that's kind of what's driving the market. The market's pretty flat right now, even though NVIDIA posted very good earnings. As people still kind of are trying to get their arms around this, I think it's going to continue to be business as usual till the end of the year unless we get some kind of major disruption. Like something comes out that AI is worthless, kind of like what we saw with the dot-coms, or AI is the next truly big thing, like Amazon has managed to deploy a worker that can feasibly do the job of an employee, then we're going to see a change. But until then, I think we're going to be in this very nebulous period where these companies are spending a lot of money but don't really have anything to show for it yet. So hopefully that was interesting for you all. I cover the AI trade very, very closely because unfortunately it's a big part of the market. But for right now, we are continuing to be cautious. Everything that we own within that sector is covered by options, so that provides a collar for you. And in the short term, they are making a lot of money. So remember, folks, money matters, but most importantly, you matter. This is the Naples Money Managers. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week.